If you want to know what I think, I won't give that up for free. Put a penny in the crusher, on the back's my memory. I'll hold real still, you take the shot, but I don't want to see whether it turns out or not, it's all the same to me. If you want to know how I feel, put me down and walk away. My hands are already bloodied here in bed. I think I'll stay. In dreams I face dread most, mundane when walking down the street. My pounding heart shocks me awake the moment our eyes meet.
All right, first, I need to take a sip of this tea and get my mind right. This is so weird. Welcome to the first episode of Us at Our Worst, an unvarnished caregiver's account of cancer and dementia care during the peak of the COVID pandemic. First off, I want to thank my son for the intro and outro music. Okay, so each episode of Us at Our Worst will be available as a podcast for listening and also on YouTube for viewing, though I will be reading directly from the as of yet unpublished book. I will also be adding in commentary and sidebars to help tell the story. So you can think of these talks as different than the book because it's like bonus episodes on a DVD. If you were old enough to have ever used a DVD, there'd be all these bonus episodes giving you sort of like the behind the scenes context for how the movie was made. So I'll be giving you behind the scenes stuff that's not in the book. I also need to add a disclaimer. And I want you to take this disclaimer seriously, because my guess is that Us at Our Worst isn't like anything you have heard before. This is not a fun story. It's a nonfiction account that covers topics such as terminal cancer, terminal dementia, which is sort of a contradiction in terms because all dementia is terminal. But specifically, this is about a type of dementia that I believe in retrospect was behavioral variant frontotemporal dementia. This story also includes topics like physical and emotional abuse. There's a ton of swearing. There's tales of acute depression. There's accounts of child abuse, downright madness, and generational family trauma. And, I almost forgot to add this one. I've got to type this to the list. Drug addiction. Yeah, it's about a lot of fun things, folks. Okay, so those are the disclaimers. So if you've gotten everyone out of the room who you don't think should be listening to this, or people who don't want to listen to it, hopefully that has been handled. So you're going to have a front row seat to a grim reality, and you might be asking yourself the same question I ask myself. Why am I going through with this at all? Why did I write the book? Why am I turning this into a podcast and a video? It's because people should not have to go through these types of things alone. Caregiving is lonely as fuck. But even if it doesn't always go that way for people, it certainly was that way for me. And so my thought is, even if one person out there, even if one caregiver out there finds comfort in knowing that I went through all of this and survived it, and it's similar to what they're going through, then that's the why. It's to give them hope, or at least to let them know that they're not the only one that went through it. Are you still listening? Strange, but okay. Okay, let's go. This is the script part I've been reading. The script part's done. Now we're officially starting. Us at Our Worst, Episode 1, recorded on May 25th, 2025 at 10:40 p.m. This is the sidebar portion here, or a sidebar portion. And mostly I'm not going to be looking up at the camera for you podcast listeners. I've got a camera rolling. Sometimes I'll be looking up at the camera, but mostly camera people out there in YouTube land, I'm just going to be looking down. This isn't really a to the camera sort of deal. Let's see. Where I want to start with like some bonus material is that, so Mom died in 2020. I think it was October 20th or October 19th of 2020. I was her full-time live-in caregiver. That's what this is all about, my journey being her full-time live-in caregiver. And I kept a journal while taking care of Mom. That is the premise of the book. So it's not a book that I like set about to write. It was a journal that I just started literally on day one when I was like getting ready to move in with Mom and Dad to help. I wrote it originally as a blog, and then reasons I'll get into later, I decided, okay, I don't want this as a blog out there, but I liked the premise of writing to an audience, that people might actually react to what I was saying, appreciate what I was saying, identify with what I was saying. But then within like 2 or 3 days, I took it offline, and I just thought, well, does that mean I'm not going to write just because no one will ever read it? And I was like, fuck that. I'm just going to write like I'm writing to an audience, like I'm still doing a blog. So that's what I did. I finished up writing, at some point after Mom died, probably within 4 or 5 months of Mom dying. No, actually it was longer than that. But anyway, the point is that, it's only in, I think like May or so of last year of 2024 was I finally able to even look at the journal entries. That's how intense the experience was. And I didn't know what I would do with it. And actually for a while, I couldn't find the file anywhere. I just totally had lost it. And then I was randomly stumbling through one of my 10 Gmail accounts, G drives, and I was like, holy shit, I found it. Oh shit, now I have to do something with it. And so what I did is first I started editing it, just kind of going through and just trying to, because a lot of the entries I wrote, I was just out of my mind. So a lot of it was like unintelligible. So I kind of cleaned it up a little bit, these journal entries. And then as I was working on this at a local coffee shop called Press Coffee, which is here where I live in Iowa City, one of the owners asked me, what is it you're always working on in here? And I told her what it was. And she was like, wow, I would love it if you would come in and read excerpts from the book. And I was like, what? And so we started cooperatively putting together a dementia caregiver support group where I would read from the book, from portions of the book, and then the audience was there. Honestly, I think the biggest audience we ever had was maybe 7 people. Normally it's like 3 or 4 people. But I did this every month, I believe, for 5 months, maybe 6 months. And what I basically did was I test read sections of the stuff you're about to hear. I test read the sections that I was thinking, there's no way I could ever put this in a book. Because at that point I had decided I'm going to try to release this as a book. But I had a lot of doubts about how people would react to such a, I don't want to call it a story, because when you say something's a true story, it still has the word story in there, which sounds like fiction. And the weird irony there is that this story does read like fiction. It doesn't seem possible that the things that myself and my close family experienced could ever be experienced by people, but it was. And so it's just weird for me to call it a story. But basically I was like, would an audience really want to hear these things? And is some of this material, though completely true, so over the top that it asks too much of a reader to even go there? So I tested out some of the hardest sections of the book with people, with a live audience, and it went really well. And I was really shocked at how well it went. And even the parts of the book that I thought people would really say, yeah, Charlie, thanks for being vulnerable enough to read that, but you got to take that out. Instead, those seemed to be the parts people enjoyed the most. also surprisingly to me, people laughed a lot. They found a lot of the stuff I'd written pretty funny. And I actually found it funny, which is funny because when I was writing it, I was not trying to be funny. It just kind of came out that way. I guess I did humor a lot to try to survive. Anyway, so that's where this whole process began. And then I was about to reach out to publishers. Like, I got through those experiences at Press Coffee. And let me give a shout out to Katie and Lisa. You guys are awesome. Thanks for all the support. If you're ever in Iowa City, go to Press Coffee. But then I was really gung-ho to get the book published. And then, to be blunt, the election happened. And let's just say the person I voted for did not win, though I wasn't super excited about the guy I voted for anyway. But everything started changing in the country so quickly. I was like, is this really the right political timing and political climate for me to be approaching book publishers saying, hey, I know the economy is falling apart and the New World Order is being established, but would you like to publish a book about dementia care? I just thought that's a lost cause. And so I've been sitting on it for a while, since pretty much the election. And then Mother's Day came around, and this thought also hit me. So I'm talking about Mother's Day 2025, and then this thought also hit me. I had recently bought a record player, which is ironically, not ironically, it's the first record player that I've owned since probably I was 14 years old. And it looks just like the record player that I had when I was 14 years old. And then I bought a record from when I'm rebuilding my record collection from when I was 14 years old. And the other night I was listening to one of the albums, and I was like, all of a sudden it just hit me. I was like, fuck, the last time I just laid in bed in the dark and listened to this album was when my mom was alive, when I was still living in her house, when she didn't have dementia, when she didn't have terminal cancer, just before so much life happened. I mean, I'm 53 now, so we're talking about, was that 30 years ago, 40 years ago, roughly? And then I was like, all right, I need to do something with this book. I still didn't feel right about going the publishing route right now. Honestly, I think getting any kind of traction on a book of this nature is a long shot. So I was just like, you know what? I've produced a podcast before. I'm a video editor. I've been a filmmaker for the last decade. This is easy. I'll go this route. I'll see if it builds an audience for a publisher to say, so I could go to a publisher and be like, hey, all right, here's a book, or here's an audience for a book. But even if it never becomes a published book, I still hope that these episodes help people, because caregivers, if you've never been a caregiver, you don't understand. Okay, let me just say, you do not understand what their life is like. Being a caregiver, and I'm going to separate these things. There's professional caregivers who do this for a living. I'm not talking about those people. No shade on them, but that is completely different. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's completely different than being a caregiver for a family member who is dying and it becomes your entire life. The number of people that are going to be walking down this path are increasing every single day. And the number of people getting dementia at younger and younger ages is increasing by the day. It's something where until it's in your world, until it's in your orbit, you don't think about it. And maybe peripherally you think, wow, I hope I never have to think about it. But it's going to be in your world eventually at the rate things are going. And so I was just like, yeah, I have to do something with this material. And also, my mom wants me to do something with this material. So anyway, yeah. All right, folks, that's the preface. That's the preface for this first inaugural episode. I'm going to start reading from the actual book now. Well, fine. I'll get into this. I when I was first sending out what I thought was the final knocked down version, because originally this was it was over 500,000 words, And I knew to get it published, I had to get it down to under 120,000 words. So I sent out what I thought to be, okay, this is as short as I'm willing to make it. The cover page has 4 working titles on it. I'm going to read you the working titles. Us at Our Worst, a Caregiver's Journal. Working title number 2, Caregiving, an unvarnished account of cancer and dementia care during the COVID pandemic. Working title number 3, What Nobody Told Us, Caregiving Through Cancer, Dementia, and a Worldwide Pandemic. And working title number 4, Caregiving, The Untold Story, Cancer, Dementia, Pandemic. Anyways, you can see I ended up going with Us at Our Worst, and then I used the subtitle for the other one, which is An Unvarnished Account of Cancer and Dementia Care During the COVID Pandemic. Okay, here's the introduction. If this introduction for a book about my mom's decline through cancer and dementia is as close as you're ever going to get to knowing her, then that's a damn shame. She'd say so, I say so. Her many friends and extended family would tell you that you really missed out. She was the friend that showed up at your hospital bedside unannounced with baked goods or your favorite deli sandwich. You needed someone to listen to your latest struggles? Call Phyllis Morris. Any hour of the day, she'd go with you to art classes if you were shy about going alone. If there was a restaurant that served French onion soup, you would be invited. Mom was buttered bread on foil, turning golden brown in the oven broiler, 4 pats of butter per slice. That was her rule. If you couldn't see the butter when the broiled toast came out, it didn't count. She insisted you had to see the butter. Mom was pot roast, 5-course Thanksgiving dinners, homemade eggnog, cookies from scratch every week, laid out to cool down on scissor-cut grocery bags. She was more than that, though, more than a lifetime of warm kitchen meals. When I find myself a single father, when I suddenly found myself a single father and parenting my 2 kids in 2008, it was she that insisted that her and Dad lend me money to help cover my rent whenever needed. She called me more times than I liked. It would be one call to say, I made you all dinner. It's in Tupperwares, and I'll be there in 30 minutes. When will you and the kids be home from school? Then she'd call again 10 minutes later to say, I just left home, on the way. Then she'd call a third time to say, I'm nearly there. That was Phyllis. That was my mom. She overdid pretty much everything. And that cuts both ways, doesn't it? My firstborn is Quinn, and second in line was Zoe. In 1998, when Quinn was about a year old, we, and there's a parenthesis here, I was still married then. So when Quinn was about a year old, I was still married then, traveled to visit my parents in North Carolina from Arizona. My mom was over the moon with being a grandparent. She cooed. This means, I got to change this name. Okay, I'm just going to say, this means you and your wife can have a date night. And Bob and I, and Bob is my father, and Bob and I can watch Quinn, right? She meant it like a joke, but she also meant it as an ask. So when I told her, Mom, until I see proof that you will never treat Quinn the way you treated me, that is never going to happen. My words were a slap she couldn't avoid, but she likely expected, because her past with me and my brother was no secret within our family. From my birth until 1971, until 1998, my mom was, how should I say this? I'm going to take a sip of tea here. And I'm actually going to stop and make sure this voice recorder is still recording. Is it still recording? Yes, indeed. Okay, how should I say this? My mom was a force of nature. She was all the strongest paradoxes rolled into one. Tortured and strong, conflicted but possessing great clarity, angry with a deep sense of beauty, lost but fierce, deeply loyal when not pushing you away. My mom, Phyllis Morris, she loved me, and she was a literal existential threat to my existence. And this memoir about healthcare won't make sense without this context. So hang on through this first ugly bit. Here's a few examples that show why mom couldn't babysit Quinn. Okay, here we go. This is a hard part to read, I have to admit. This is a sidebar, by the way. Damn, I don't really want everyone knowing this, but okay. I mean, this is what's real. This is what's up. So, back to the book. One of my earliest childhood memories is of her hands on my throat, choking me. I can still feel those hands on my throat. When I was 4 years old, she went into my bedroom on a warm night in Lynchburg, Virginia, with loud stomps and screams. She made a lot of trips from there to the front door of the house, carrying armfuls of all of my favorite things into the foyer. She then threw all of them one at a time onto the front lawn. I was then forced to go bring them all back in. I was a 4-year-old at night, pawing around in the front yard in my PJs as Mom screamed at me from the doorway. This was normal for me by then. When I was around 10 years old, I was flying backwards, airborne. She told me she hadn't appreciated what I said by striking me with her closed fist. The center of my chest stung as I watched her drift out of view before I hit the floor. She stood over me as I lay there sobbing, and she said, "I dare you to say that again." During my teen years, Mom had a habit of waking me up at 2 a.m. She'd throw the door open and start yelling at me. This would last for about 30 minutes. This was the price I paid for not agreeing with all of her worldviews. She would not relent until I was in tears. Her mission was to force me to her will. This happened weekly for years. At the age of 18, I paid for a rental van to move my things out of my college dorm room from my freshman year. Mom arrived with my older brother to help pack up and move out. That evening, she commented that paying for the rental van wasn't enough. She said she wanted compensation for the cost she paid to raise me. I wanted her to shut the fuck up. I asked her to name a price. The reason I had money for this at the age of 18 is I had just come into some money as compensation for a car accident I had been in. So she named her price. I wrote her a check for thousands of dollars. I don't know, maybe it was $4,000. I mean, this was 1990. But she cashed it. And in 1990, $4,000 was a lot for an 18-year-old kid to be giving to his mom. But it probably wasn't enough for Mom. The most significant moment, though, is one that I cannot personally recall. You don't remember much when you're looking up at the railing of an infant's crib. I was the infant. And I only know it happened because she told me about it herself when I was probably around 23 years old. And I want to do a sidebar here. Not only did Mom tell me about this when I was 23 years old, I had been doing a whole lot of personal therapy on myself. No surprise, I needed therapy. But Mom, after she relayed this story to me once, she just started telling it to me, all the time. She probably told me this, and when I say all the time, I mean, she probably told me this story like maybe 20 more times during the course of my life. It was always the same consistent story, by the way. Anyway, back to the story. So the story she relayed occurred when I was a newborn and less than a year old. We were living in Dallas, Texas at the time. I was asleep in my crib. Joe, my brother, was older than me and asleep in his bedroom. And she stood over me with a butcher knife. She was caught in the throes of postpartum depression, or let's just say her normal depression. Well, I will never know which, and she didn't say. But her plan, as stated by her, was to kill me, then to kill my brother, and then to kill herself. Because in her own words, and this is a quote, "Why should I live after doing something so awful?" End quote. She changed her mind, though, and then she decided to just kill herself. She wanted to protect my brother and me from her anger, so she went into the kitchen. She was debating the timing of when and how to do it. She was standing there with the butcher knife. And then, according to her, before she could act, in walked Dad from his late night at work. My mom began therapy after that. And if you flash forward to my telling her she couldn't be left alone with my newborn son in 1998, yeah, these are the reasons why. I mean, Mom had done a lot of therapy on herself by the year 1998, but I was still cautious. And after I challenged her that day, saying she couldn't be alone with my child until I saw more changes, do you know what she did? She did even more therapy. And I'm not exaggerating. My children never saw that ugly side of my mom that I was worried that was still in there. Mom reached a point where she felt such deep shame over what she put me and my brother through that she couldn't bear to talk about the past. She would literally plead with me to never bring up my childhood if it involved rehashing old fights or disagreements we had experienced. And by then, I had done extensive therapy of my own. I forgave her. We healed. We moved on. So I say from about 1999 till 2019, Mom was always in my corner, always supportive, and the best grandma I could ever leave my kids alone with. 0 relapses. Now, I will say, this is a sidebar, there was one hilarious fucking relapse. Oh my God. So one day when me and my kid, I went over with my kids and myself, and Mom wanted to take the kids to the mall. And at this point, I think my son was like maybe 16, and he was wearing like shorts and a t-shirt, but he was also wearing a terry cloth bathrobe, because that's what you do when you're 16 and it's 2016, I guess. Mom completely lost her shit. She refused to go to the mall with Quinn wearing a robe, and she had like a pretty real meltdown. And my kids were just like, Dad, they're like whispering, Dad, is this the kind of stuff you had to live with every day? And I was like, yeah, every day, but over even more minor things. Anyway, sidebar over. Going back to the best grandma I could ever leave my kids home alone with, almost 0 relapses. So I just want you, the reader, to understand that's the Phyllis I need you to think about. That's the one I want you to remember on every page of this book. I want you to think about the fighter, the healed, the one that pushed herself hard so that she would stop hurting those she loved. It's really important that you hold on to that, because objective truth matters, especially when it comes to dementia. The first thing a family loses when a loved one gets dementia is a sense of objective reality. So my mom fought her demons, and dementia released them once again. So really, this book isn't about my mom. It's about how an extended family survived what dementia can do to good people. This is an unvarnished nonfiction tale. It's unpretty. It's not about redemption. It's about survival. It's also about the added indignation of how my mother got terminal cancer right about the same time her dementia symptoms began ramping up. Oh, and it happened during the peak of the pandemic. Oh, and I nearly forgot to mention that even with all the therapy, Mom never managed to kick her drug addiction to pain pills and muscle relaxers and sleep aids. So it's about a lot of damn things that were hard for everyone involved. Why does this book exist at all? It's not so you won't have to go through anything. It's so you won't have to go through anything like I did without a guidebook. I don't want anyone to be as alone as I was, well, as we all were. This book is literally us at our worst. It might be you someday, or maybe it already is or was. Either way, my mom didn't like to let people suffer alone. I guess I learned that from her. So here is this book. I hope it helps. This story unfolds in the form of actual journal entries that I kept when I suddenly became her full-time live-in caregiver. The original journal length was around 550,000 words. Yes, that's an awful lot of words. But when writing was my main survival mechanism, writing that many was easy. The hard part was turning those hundreds of entries into something that the world of publishing would ever consider, which is to say, around 80,000 to 120,000 words. My challenge was never how to write enough to fill a book, but what to winnow out and still stay true to what things felt like. I have worked tirelessly to do this, but I don't want the reader to have an entertaining story. I want the reader to feel that they are me in those desperate moments. I want the reader to be able to learn through seeing with my eyes. Thus, I shortened the length of this book by deleting entire entries and preserving intact the ones that remained. As much as possible, I honored the way an entry was written, and only rarely did I edit or change what was said for the sake of brevity and in hopes of achieving a shortened volume fit for publishing criteria. As you read this book, I just ask that you do Phyllis and I that favor, because this introduction is the only place in this memoir where either of us are portrayed as friendly, kind, or clear-headed. Remember us like that, okay? Send us your prayers back in time so we can survive it all. Maybe your future kind thoughts as you read are the bridge we need to cross through such hard things in the past. Because all that hardship is still somehow unfolding over and over. Who knows, it just might help. This book represents us at our worst, but hope and love still won the day. Okay, now moving on to the foreword. I started taking care of my parents in 2018. Mom took a fall and developed deep vein thrombosis, which then led to blood clots and pulmonary embolisms in her lungs. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and on that very day, I was getting ready to fly out of the country to film on the next day in Canada. I had raised the funds, I had lined everything up, and then I got the call on Mother's Day. Wow, hold on, this is a real-time sidebar here. Wow, I forgot that this was mentioned in this part. Wow. So I'm starting reading this on the week after Mother's Day, and here we are talking about Mother's Day. That is crazy. Okay, back to the book. It was the first time at only the age of 46 that I realized my parents had suddenly entered the phase of life where they needed looking after. I remember the realization and knowing that I wasn't ready. I was still in the final year of raising my own kids as a single parent. I had been a single parent in exceedingly challenging circumstances for 12 years. Sidebar, I just want to stress here the definition of single parent. A lot of people who are married, a lot of people who are in a new relationship who've been divorced, they still refer to themselves as a single parent. I sort of disagree with that, because if you've got someone in your life helping you get through the challenges and struggles, I don't see that as single parenting anymore, even though just because you're not married, if you're in a primary relationship, that changes things. Just so you know what I mean here is my exceedingly challenging circumstances as single parent for 12 years was me single as a single parent for 12 years. All I did was single parenting. So I was accustomed to handling everything on my own, going it alone, taking care of it all. Part of what I was counting on in that final stretch of my last kid at home's senior year of high school was that I would finally be able to travel and film and ski and climb and explore. In terms of taking care of my parents, I had always planned on it being me and not my brother. He had made it clear that he wasn't going to be the one to do it. We actually had an official meeting about it, our agreement had been that if my caretaking of my parents put a dent in my ability to earn money, then my brother would provide the financial assistance to make it all work. He had way more money than I had, and so we agreed on that. But we certainly hadn't been planning on things starting in 2018. I mean, maybe 2028? They're in their mid-70s. They are, or were, quite healthy until they weren't. I thought I easily had 10 years of post-single parenting to work on my list of hopes and dreams. All those ideas began to fade as 2018 marched on. And I want to do a little backtrack here as a sidebar because I did not include it in the intro. But the very first time I actually knew that something was up with Mom was, I'm pretty certain it was Christmas time of 2017. What happened is we were all at an Italian restaurant for Christmas, my kids, my mother, myself, my dad, my mom. And on the way, walking out of the meal, we're walking through the restaurant, I notice Mom just suddenly kind of tilts over sideways and she puts out her hand to steady herself against a table. And she kind of laughs and she's like, huh. And I was like, Mom, what was that? And she's like, I don't know. And she was just sort of embarrassed by it. And then there is a grocery store right next to the restaurant. So what happens is my dad's in the driver's seat. The car is idling because it was kind of chilly outside. So he's got the heater going. My kids are in the car. I pop into the grocery store. I come back out. I think what happened is like mom and I went in together. That's right. Mom and I went in together. Mom went out ahead of me. And then I was paying for like the groceries or whatever. I came out. I look in the car. Mom's not there. And I was like, where's Mom? And then there's this man standing behind our car and he's like frantically waving me over and he looks angry. And he's like, what's the matter with you? And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, this is your mother, right? And I was like, oh my God, my mom's lying on the pavement. It's right there behind the car. And so I guess she had like been on the ground talking to this guy. And so I was like, Mom, what the fuck? What are you doing on the floor? And she was like, not the floor, the ground. And she was just like, I don't know. I just fell. I don't know how it happened. Only in retrospect did I realize that was the beginning. And then in 2018, around the time that Mom fell and got deep vein thrombosis, later on, shortly after that, I caught Mom doing something that she thought was pretty damn funny. We were talking in her house in the foyer. I left to drive home, realized I forgot something inside, and in that 10 seconds to the car, turning around, going back to the front door, unlocking the front door, I let myself in, and I see my mom on the stairway going up to her bedroom. But she's not walking. She's crawling on her hands and knees up the steps. And as soon as I come in, she just starts laughing. And she's like, oh, I can't believe you're seeing me do this. And she's just like, this is so humiliating. And I started laughing, and I'm like, Mom, what the hell? And she's like, all right, don't make a big deal out of this, but I've started to feel a little, like I don't have the right balance to go up and down the steps. And sometimes I crawl because I don't want to lose my balance and fall again. And so only in retrospect did I really realize, okay, something was starting then in that time. Okay, sidebar over. Going back to all of my ideas of freedom began to fade as 2018 marched on. By 2019 of spring, Mom was seeing all kinds of specialists, chasing a constellation of strange symptoms. I had also moved my parents out of their house where all the bedrooms were on the second story. That was a big old fight, but I got them there. And so at this point, they're living in an apartment. And on the day, my last kid at home, my daughter, Zoe, on the last day that she moved to college, which was August of 2019, my mother got diagnosed with cancer. It was a slow-moving cancer. The doctors told us, quote unquote, it's a good kind of cancer to get. That's what the docs initially quipped. Then a few weeks later, it was upgraded to stage 4A, and it had metastasized. And it was a very rare variation of an already very rare form of cancer, which is called extramammary Paget's disease. The doctors said that they are going for a cure that will last 3 months to a year. Apparently, this kind of cancer always comes back, and there are no targeted treatments developed for it yet. In terms of numbers, less than 50 women per year are known to get this type of cancer. So as my daughter left for college, I watched myself actually become completely unchanged. The rescue operation I had directed towards my children and the single parenting challenges. Basically, that whole rescue operation was still in full swing. It had just transferred completely to my parents. I had moved them 3 times in 6 months into different living situations. And when they moved out of the state of North Carolina to Virginia, I had to go there and often to help manage the move and increasingly to manage their daily affairs. Their memories, through the removal of their routines and through age, had begun to slide quite a bit. And it was during this time that their good decision-making just started going right out the window. So now, once more, I was thinking for 3 people, my parents and myself. Now, I'm wired for taking care of people. I do excel at it. I'm not resentful about it. But after 12 years of single parenting in a Mission Impossible scenario, I am worn down to 0. Tomorrow, and you might notice here a sidebar, I'm sort of moving into the present tense, speaking about things in the present tense instead of the past. So tomorrow I'm moving in with my parents. We are all moving to the town where my mom's cancer treatment is set to begin this week. I managed to find them and us a temporary furnished apartment 1 mile from the cancer clinic. What we'll be doing is chemo and radiation on the first day, then 4 more days of radiation. Rinse and repeat for about 6 weeks, then a 3-month break before a PET scan happens to see if it worked. And a PET scan is basically the current gold standard for body-wide cancer detection and screening. So, well, I'll be adjusting to yet another move. This will be the 4th one for my parents in the last 6 months. And I'm standing here typing while packing up my apartment because writing is what keeps me sane. All I can say is there is what was before this, and I made it, in terms of single parenting. And I can say that there is what is before me now, and I'll make it. But I'll also say, I don't want to have to make it any longer. All I want to do is stop fucking taking care of other people, even for a month. I just desperately need a reset button. I'm exhausted. I'm gaining weight from not being able to take care of my own health. I don't have time to exercise. My whole world is taking care of my parents now. I sit in the midst of an empty nest with both kids gone, and I haven't even had the space or time to ponder that fact until writing it down right now. How will I continue to be lonely, single, exhausted, and continue to have a life where all I do is take care of my parents? I do not know. So that's the end of Us at Our Worst podcast video episode 1. And I want to mention as you were listening to all these stories to just remember these are my experiences. They're just mine. Not all cancers, not all dementias produce the same kind of behaviors that you are hearing about. And before we go, I want to talk about the project logo cover art. It's made by my youngest child, Zoe. And yes, that is an actual photo of me climbing out of my mom's actual pillbox from 2020, thanks to the magic of Photoshop. And the intro and outro song that you can't stop humming out loud, well, that's an original tune composed and sung by my eldest kid, Quinn. He recorded this when he was helping me take care of my mom, and he even played it for her once. Last but not least, I had that track sound mastered by Jay Siebold at sieboldsound.com. If you ever need sound mastering and mixing work, be sure to look him up at sieboldsound.com, and I have him linked in the show notes. On YouTube, I've also posted a standalone video of just that song in case you want to play it on repeat. Sometimes I do. And finally, if you are watching this on YouTube and you want to hear it as a podcast, then Google us at Our Worst in your favorite podcast app. That might not be correct to say Google us. You know what I mean. Or just check the video description for this video here on YouTube for a link to the podcast. Conversely, if you're on the podcast and you want to find the YouTube channel, just search for us at Our Worst Podcast. And the link to it is in the show tones for the podcast as well. That's all sort of confusing, isn't it? Anyway, all I can say is it's a little extra work trying to figure out how to make sure all the podcast listeners know that it's also a video and that all the video watchers know that it's also a podcast. I think the easiest solution is just watch it on YouTube, turn your screen off, and just listen to it like it's a podcast. Anyway, that's it. Here's the outro music.
If you want to know what I think, I won't give that up for free. Put a penny in the crusher, on the back's my memory. I'll hold real still, you take the shot, but I don't want to see whether it turns out or not. It's all the same to me. If you want to know how I feel, put me down and walk away. My hands are already bloodied here in bed. I think I'll stay. In dreams I face dread most mundane when walking down the street. My pounding heart shocks me awake the moment our eyes meet.